Hello, hello. All right, let me get my microphone hooked up. Oh. All right, are we good? I think we're good to go. Let me check my settings here while I wait for y'all to jump on board. So, guys, if you are watching replay, trying to get this done. All right, if you're watching the replay, go ahead and hit replay in the comments section. I do like to go back and see who was watching the replay and catch any questions that you guys might have from the replay. Hey guys, hey Kim, hey Ashley. Oh, good to see you. All right, sorry guys, little flustered tonight, having helping kids getting back from spring break into the school swing of things. So having to do all the fun homework and help kids out with technology and all that kind of good stuff. Marianne, you are here. Oh, you got the book. I am so happy, Marianne. So happy. Hey Adam, we got Kenny on board. We got a nice crew popping on board. I'm real happy. Last week, y'all left me hanging. Well, you didn't leave me hanging. You gave me some good questions during the live show. But this week, y'all sent in questions and you tagged me on questions that other people had. And that makes me a very happy PT. Hey, Mark S., he's joining me. He is foregoing watching his Knicks game to come and join me. I feel so honored, Mark S. I am doing great, Harsh. How are you? Lori, good to see you. We got Steven on board. Steven with his new socket. He's going to be rocking it. Hey, Pam. We got Rita on board. Rita, I hope you were able to fix that little problem with ordering the book. We got Bonnie and Tom in the maple syrup shack tonight. I love it. It's Pastor David is in the house. Good job. All right, guys, I'm also streaming from my YouTube channel. So if you prefer to watch me from there, sometimes it's a little bit easier to watch me from there. I'm under Cosi Talks. Comadre, girl, you're not late. I just popped on a minute ago. It's one of those mom of four evenings. That's all I got to say. Hey, Glenn, glad you could join in. Mark says I have two eyes. So one eye is watching Cosi Talks and the other eye is watching the Knicks game. Johnny V from Poughkeepsie, New York, and the Cosi Talks house. What's up, Brian? Glad you could join in this evening. All right, guys, we got a nice little crew on board already, so I'll just get started. For those of you joining me for the first time, welcome. My name is Cosi Belloso. I'm a physical therapist, amputee specialist here in Tampa, Florida. I am the proud owner of a private practice here that is exclusively for working with amputees. And, oh, water, I know. I am breaking my Cosi Talks rule and I'm bringing water on the show because let me tell you what, the Florida heat has gotten started and it is relentless in here, especially with the lights going on right now. All right, guys. So a lot of stuff going on this week. Last week, I launched the Above Knee book and oh my gosh, you guys are amazing. So basically, I've had so many orders that I actually had to get a P.O. box. No joke. I got my own P.O. box. I feel so important. I got a P.O. box at the post office today to help with everything that I need to get organized with all the mail outs I've been doing on the Above the Knee book. So for those of you who have been purchasing these books, thank you so much. Appreciate the support. If you're even thinking about getting one of these books, and I've got one for Above the Knee, and one for below the knee. These are 150 exercises for above the knee and below the knee for head to toe fitness. If you're even thinking about getting a book, guys, go ahead and get it because I do have a limited amount. And if I have to go to a reprint, it takes time to do that. So I'm just going to put that out there. Hey, Benny, check and can't say, oh man, playing ball tonight? Nice. Nice. All right. Denise is in. Oh, from North Carolina. Go Tar Heels. Oh. All right, guys. Pam, yours got sent out. Don't worry, darling. All right. So we got a lot of really kind of heavy duty questions tonight. And some of them are probably going to spark a lot of talk. And I want to be hearing a lot from you guys in the audience tonight. So this was a question that I was tagged in. And it was in one of the support groups. And the person was saying, I see a lot of amputees that are not heavy and it sound like, okay, so the way the person wrote it is a little confusing, but basically this individual is struggling with carrying around extra weight and being obese. And he was noticing that the people around him who were not obese were having an easier time with their prosthesis and, what to do. So basically this particular individual is struggling right now with carrying extra weight around. Oh, Marianne, oh, darling. Okay. Hey, Chuck. So, this is something that, I'm a physical therapist, licensed physical therapist. But in the 20 plus years, or not 20 plus, 19 plus years I've been a PT, I've had to bring in a lot of psychology into my treatments with my patients. I've had to bring in a lot of nutrition into the treatment with my patients. So it's not just physical therapy, right? Vocational rehab. There's a lot of things that as physical therapists, because we spend so much time with our patients, right? And oftentimes in amputee care, the prosthetist and the physical therapist are the last clinicians left, right? Because your surgeon will discharge you, you'll be discharged from other services, but with your physical therapist and your prosthetist, you continue to be followed by them. So you tend to develop, hopefully, a good bond with these clinicians, and they can tend to help you out in other arenas. So when it comes to the topic of weight management, this is something that I've had to address a lot with a lot of my patients. Hey, Sandra, glad you could join in. Okay. The obvious thing is when people lose their limbs, right? And they go through the healing process, and they go through the very long process of learning how to fit a prosthesis, walk with a prosthesis, they're sedentary, right? The getting up and moving around all day long for 12 to 14 hours a day just comes to a complete halt, right? So you don't move, you're going to pack on the weight. I'd say, 70% of the people who come into my clinic, or I've seen over the years, will tell me that they gained weight during their recovery process from amputation. So guys, let's do a quick Cosi. Reggie! Oh man, Reggie came to see me tonight. Oh, Reggie. All right, it's a party. Hey, Pat. Oh, and Pat's here. Man, I got all my favorites in the house tonight. All right, guys, so quick Cosi poll. How many of you gained weight when you lost your limb? Put it in the comment section. Reggie gained COVID-19 pounds. Well, Reggie, man, you're a good-looking guy no matter what weight you are. All right, guys, go ahead. Put that in the comment section. How many of you gained weight during the process of recovery process? Go ahead and put it in. Guys, I'll be honest. For those of you who know, some of you might know my personal story. I went through breast cancer 6 years ago, and I went through a year's worth of multiple surgeries, rounds of chemotherapy. And prior to that, I was actually in the best shape of my life. But during that time, believe it or not, with chemotherapy, I gained weight. I was more sedentary because I was knocked on the couch and the chemotherapy was messing around with things. Yeah, Jeffrey gained weight. Marianne says that she lost a bunch of weight. Okay. Denise says she gained weight. Andy says I do, and I need to get back into shape. Rita gained 20 pounds. Again, guys, you're not moving when your body is going through that kind of a crisis. Patricia's raising her hand. You're not moving, and our bodies were meant to move for 12 to 14 hours a day, right? So, what's a person to do, right? And why do I address this with my patients? Okay, because let's face it, guys, it's a pretty sensitive subject. It's a sensitive subject. And let me just preface this by saying this has nothing to do with the cosmetic self-image, right? This is coming from a clinical health perspective, okay? When we're carrying extra weight on our bodies, okay, we all know it adds extra stress. It's adding extra stress to our heart. It adds extra stress to our kidneys, our organs. It's adding extra stress to our joints, right? To our joints. Prior to just focusing on amputees, I worked with all sorts of orthopedic injuries, right? Tons and tons of total hip, total knee, and lower back pain surgeries. The majority of the patients I saw who ended up having to do hip replacement, knee replacements, or lower back surgeries, the majority of them could have avoided surgery had they lost weight and gotten themselves to a healthy weight range. Think about that, guys. The majority of my patients that had to have joint replacements, okay, could have avoided that surgery had they lost weight. Some of them couldn't. Some of them had genetic degenerative joint disease and they had arthritis and they were in good shape. But the majority of my patients, right? So, and this is for people who have two limbs, right? So for someone who has lost a limb, is sedentary, and is now having to carry this extra weight, okay? the stress is now being placed more on the sound limb side, right? So you're being predisposed now to more joint problems on the sound side. Think about the energy you're expending, right, guys? So you guys have heard me talk about these statistics before. The average below the knee amputee, right, spends 40 to 60% more energy to walk. Think about that, guys. 40 to 60% more energy. That's like me going and running 3 miles. And that's the amount of energy, right, a below the knee amputee has to use to walk. An above the knee has to use 80% more energy. And my bilaterals, it just goes up from there, right? So if you're carrying extra weight, that energy expenditure just goes up and up and up, and you're going to be completely exhausted by the end of the day. Okay. The other side of it, many people who lost their limb was due to complications from diabetes or blood pressure or vascular disease. And as you've heard me say a lot on the show, you know, when you amputate the leg, you don't amputate the diseases that caused it. The diabetes is still there. The blood pressure is still there. The cardiac problems, the vascular problems are still there. And we all know that extra weight is going to contribute to these issues, right? Here's another way to look at it, because a lot of people really don't realize the impact that even just 10 extra pounds can add to the human body. Okay, and this is a trick I learned once from a friend of mine who was a dietitian. She would work with people, and when they would check back in with her, right, she would ask them, you know, track their weight. So when they lost 5 pounds, okay, which for some people 5 pounds may not seem like a lot of weight, she had a 5-pound sack of sugar in her office, and she would make her client pick up that 5-pound sack of sugar and walk around the office as a reminder to them as to exactly how much 5 pounds weighs. Right, guys? So think about that. If you can do that experiment in your home, go into your pantry, right? Find that 5-pound sack of sugar or sack of flour and pick it up. So if you're not at your healthy weight, right, that's a really great visual image and a really great, you know, tactile sensation as to how much weight you're carrying around, right? So what's a person to do? All right. Again, I am not a nutritionist. I am not a dietitian. This is just my take on diet and nutrition over the 19 years I've been a clinician and working with dietitians, right? The best diet that will work for you is the one that you will stick with. Okay. Let me repeat that. The best diet that will work for you is the one that you will stick with. Okay. We have keto diets. We have Mediterranean diets. We have South Beach diet. We have, good heavens, help me out here, guys, vegan diets. We have how many out there diets? Okay. A lot of these diets, number one, they were designed for other pathologies. Did y'all know that the keto diet was actually originally designed to treat seizure disorders? Right? And the gluten-free diet was designed for people with celiac disease, which a very, very, very small percentage of the human population has it. Okay, so the first thing I would tell you is if you're looking at going onto a diet for weight loss or nutrition, first of all is to say, if you do not have a metabolic disorder, really think hard about some of these extreme fad diets. Okay, just think hard about it. Okay. And then you have to look at this for long term. Okay. How many of us have known people who were on the keto diet? They lost 50 to 60 pounds. And then a year later, they were able to keep it off. I only know about 2 people that were able to do it. Okay. Or, you know, along in a lot of my girlfriends, the low carb diet, right? That's a big thing among the mom friends that I have in my community. Eating low carbs, they lose the weight and then they start eating carbs again and they gain the weight again, right? So guys, overall, okay, if you are someone who needs to think about losing some of this weight, my recommendation is it is worth the investment into your health to get the help of a dietitian or nutritionist, okay? It is worth the time and effort because so many of us don't know what we're doing. I use a dietitian myself. They help me. He helps me with my personal diet when it comes to training for my running and my races and things like that. So even I have someone who's helping me tweak things along the way. Okay. So let's see. These comments have been flying in, and I want to read some of these comments. Okay, so Rhonda said yes, but very sick and had lost lots of weight. So Kim lost weight. Stephen says he's continued to do weight training out of a wheelchair. Bravo. Megan gained weight. Bonnie gained weight, didn't walk for 4 years. Brian gained a bunch. Tom says he was fortunate enough to keep it off. I stayed pretty active using crutches, and there you go. Let's see. Patrick says, yep, he's the physical therapist as well. So he says he sees it with joint replacements with the increased weight. Hey, Jim, glad you could jump on board. Let's see. Joe says, I try to get a proper amount of nutrients every day and drink plenty of water. Hey, Barbara. Reggie says, I gained weight during the pandemic because I was homebound and sedentary. I wanted to walk and exercise to lose the weight, but being heavier posed a new challenge to do the workouts that I used to do on the regular. We're going to address that. Thank you for bringing that up, Reggie. I could feel the difference on my residual limbs. Joe says, I've seen a dietitian and they're great. Bonnie says, after becoming a bilateral AK and learning to walk, I've now lost 45 pounds. Guys, that's really amazing that just the simple act of walking, which it's not simple. I get it. Let me backtrack a little bit. It's not simple, but you don't have to be a marathon runner to be able to lose weight. And I'm going to address exactly what Reggie said. What happens, the catch-22 is you need to be able to be mobile in order to lose weight. But some of you are still learning how to be mobile. Or like in Reggie's case, if he's carrying that extra weight around, that extra weight is putting a lot of stress on his joints. So he can't exercise with that same exercise program that he was using prior to gaining all that weight. So I'm going to tell you guys a story about one of my favorite cases ever. It's one of the cases that I am most proud of on a professional and personal level. He was actually my very first bilateral above the knee patient. We're talking like 18 years ago when I saw this patient. And I'm going to call this patient Leonard, right? So Leonard was a young man. He was a UPS worker. And while he was on the job, he got pinned between two cars and it pretty much severed his legs right on the spot. So one side was a knee disarticulation, but the other side was a really, really short above the knee amputation. I mean, he just had a tiny little nub left. It wasn't a lot left. The problem is Leonard, prior to his amputations, he was tipping the balance at 250 pounds and he was only 5'5". So he was not a very tall guy. He had a very large abdomen. He was very, very overweight for his height. So when he came in to see me, the prosthetist and I are just sitting there and I'm going, oh boy, this is my first bilateral above the knee patient, right? So fortunately, I was working with a prosthetist who was just absolutely amazing. But he said, I can't fit this guy for stubbies. Number one, his one residual limb is very, very short. So it's going to be very hard to get suspension on it. And number two, his belly is so big that it just simply won't allow the stubbies to fit. I mean, it was just, right? So thank goodness he was under workers' comp. So we wrote, my supervisor and I, the guy who trained me with everything I know about amputees, Curtis, he and I sat down and we did a full evaluation on Leonard. And we did a very careful documentation stating that he needed to undergo a weight loss program that was going to be medically necessary so that he could learn to use the prosthetic devices, right? Thankfully, it was approved. So Leonard was able to come into my clinic 4 days a week. Well, then came the obvious challenge of how do I get this guy who can't walk to lose weight, right? So we did exactly that, Patrick. Thank you very much. We used upper body. So I got him first on a strengthening program. It was a 3-pronged thing. I got him set up with a nutritionist because I told him, he kept telling me, I eat well. And I had to sit down and have a come to Jesus talk with him and say, Leonard, you're not eating well. If this is the weight you are at and you have no metabolic disorders, your thyroid is fine, you're not eating well and you're not going to be able to outrun your spoon, right? So we set him up with a dietitian who put him on a very careful diet with good calorie intake and good protein and good quality foods. Then we put him on a strengthening program. And this also required a lot of imagination. So the prosthetist and I had to design various straps and harnesses and things to help him adapt to the gym equipment. So we were doing a lot of strengthening. The cardio was the trickier part. We did the upper extremity bike. And I sat there and I worked this guy. So he was there for about an hour and a half every day, half an hour doing strength training, an hour doing cardiac training. And we would train him on the upper extremity bike, very similar to how I would have trained somebody on a lower extremity bike. Okay, bringing the heart rate up and down, doing different interval exercises. It took about 3 months and he lost 60 pounds. Guys, think about it, 60 pounds. And this was all done without being able to even stand up yet. Okay. And as Leonard got stronger, because obviously he's doing a ton of bicycle, man. So his heart is getting strong. So I would be like, okay, we're plateauing, right? So we just had to get creative. And I put him in his wheelchair and I said, okay, now you're going to start wheeling yourself in the wheelchair around your neighborhood where you have little elevations. We don't have really big hills here in Florida. Okay. And he did it. And then once he was able to get into the stubbies, his belly had reduced enough, had shrunk enough, okay, that he was able to get into those stubbies. And then the act of walking in those stubbies, boy, was that a challenge for him. And that also continued to help him with the weight loss. Okay, guys, we're talking about a guy that most people looking at him would say, this man will never walk again. And he did it. And we did it during a time where we didn't have half the equipment that we have now for these type of things, right? All right, let's see. Joe says, I've used a dietitian. Yep. Joe says, and doctors can write a script to see a dietitian so your insurance will pay. Yes. Yes. Yes, 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 yes. Okay. Brian says 350 pounds and in bad shape, been in bed for the last 3 months. And Patrick said it right there. Consider upper extremity for aerobics if limited with lower extremity, using a pedal, right? And guys, there's so many things out there, so many devices out there now on Amazon that were not accessible 18 years ago when I was working with Leonard, right? And good nutrition, guys. If there's one thing like my coach, when I'm working with my coach right now, when it comes to fitness and my nutrition and just fine tuning things with my running and everything else, the constant thing is you cannot outrun your spoon. Okay. Unless you are 19 years and younger, right? The days of just eat and go for a small run are over. Okay. You cannot outrun your spoon. When it comes to successful weight loss and maintaining a healthy weight, it has to be diet and exercise. You can't just do one or the other. You need to do both. Okay. Otherwise, you're not going to have a good outcome. Not going to have a good outcome, right? Patrick says the heart doesn't care where you get your aerobics. I like that, Patrick, right? Joe says, I lost 80 pounds in my wheelchair. Okay. And guys, again, this is something that's a very sensitive topic. This is something that's a very difficult thing. Okay. Losing weight is not easy. If losing weight were easy, we'd all be a bunch of skinny twigs walking around, right? It is not easy to do. And then if you're on top of that, having to go through the process of learning how to walk again, it's a lot. It's a lot of things to have to deal with. But it is something that I highly recommend that if this is something that you are struggling with, to take a hard look at your lifestyle. Take a hard look at your lifestyle and just say, where do you want to be 6 months from now? Do you still want to be struggling with these same issues, or invest your time and perhaps even your finances in finding yourself that nutritionist or the dietitian that can help you out with this? Okay. I'm going to say one more thing on the matter and then I'm going to move on. So going back to what Reggie said in terms of, finding a way to lose the weight without putting more stress on your body. Another example, and this was more recent, this was about 2 years ago, a gentleman came to my clinic and he's a below the knee amputee and he wanted to learn how to run. And he had already gotten himself a blade set up in a socket, but he was a very overweight man. And, I had to, again, I have a lot of come to Jesus talks with my patients. I basically had to have one of those talks with him. And I said, in learning how to run, he was going to be putting too much stress on his joints. Okay. And we worked something out. I taught him just the basics of running so that he could run in the case of an emergency. But in his particular case, I put him on a very strenuous walking program. And I said that he needed to lose a certain amount of weight before he started running, mainly because the amount of weight he would be pounding into his joints, right, as an amputee was going to eventually cause more issues down the line. Okay, so it's definitely finding that fine balance, guys. If you're in that process where you need to lose weight, you want to lose weight, you want to get into an exercise program, again, seeking out a physical therapist to help you put this program together is going to help you do it in a successful way and also without getting injured down the line. Okay. Patrick says, diet doesn't mean starving. Better choices. Some suggest smaller, frequent meals throughout the day keeps the metabolism steady. Consult a dietitian. And you're absolutely right, Patrick. But what it obviously boils down to, and you can have, oh my gosh, there's like cat fights all over the social media. Snack time, no snack time, small meals, large meals, macros. The diet that works for you is the one that you will stick with. That's it. That's it. Okay. I don't like keto. I don't like gluten-free diets unless you have celiac disease or some other metabolic disorder. I don't like those fad diets, but if someone comes to me and says, this is the diet that I've been on for X amount of years, and they have a healthy weight and lifestyle, go for it. It's the diet that's going to work for you. Okay. Me personally, I have to eat every 2 hours. If I don't eat every 2 hours, I turn into a very mean person. Okay. So I've structured my diet and my nutrition to fit my needs and to fit the way that I know I will stick with. That's it. That's all it boils down to. All right. So guys, it's discipline. It's discipline. There's no shortcuts here. The same way there's no shortcuts to learning how to walk, no shortcuts to getting strong. There are no shortcuts to losing the weight. You got to put the work in. And I know I sound like I'm dealing a lot of tough love tonight, but this is something that people really need to take ownership for, and people need to really just have a hard look. Okay. Because I see, yes, definitely hangry, Keith. The intermittent fasting diet, again, Kim, and again, I am not a dietitian. I am not a nutritionist. This is just based on what I've learned throughout the years, right, of being a clinician. Okay. For me, it really boils down to calories coming in have to be less than calories going out. Okay. So, and what I've learned for my own self the hard way is if I restrict calories too much, right, my body goes into starvation mode, and then I end up binging later on and gaining all the weight back, right? And it's a vicious cycle. What I've learned for myself during the time frames that I had to lose weight, basically after my pregnancies, if I restricted calories just a little bit, just enough to kick off a little bit of weight loss, it would take me longer to lose the weight, but I would keep it off, okay? And in my personal case, I have to do a lot of protein because I do a lot of running and heavy duty exercise. So if I don't have a lot of protein, good proteins into my diet, then I start to feel yucky, like my body needs the protein. My muscles need the protein to repair themselves. I start to get hungry and I start to crave the wrong things, right? And I start eating the junk food, right? So that's what I've noticed about me. And this is, again, I have been working with a nutritionist to help me figure this out. Okay. So guys, for me, it was probably the best money I ever spent investing in a dietitian and nutritionist to help me figure these things out with my own nutrition and diet. And I highly recommend it for anybody out there who is struggling with their weight. All right. So yeah, that's fresh food, limit process. And guys, it's also quality of life. It's finding that, that because I love to eat. I'll say it. I love to eat. So whenever somebody tries to tell me that I need to cut out a certain food group or anything like that, it just ends up backfiring on me. Keith, you crack me up. Vietnamese grilled pork spring rolls are not my friend. Well, speak for yourself, Keith. I would love to have some. They can be my friend any day of the week. My protein go-to, salmon, tuna, chicken, and ground bison. I do all of my cooking myself. I love to cook. First of all, I love to cook. I love making everything. And I've definitely noticed, especially since cancer, I cleaned up my diet even more. Since cancer, I pretty much cut out all of my processed foods. And that might sound like, oh, but I cook really well, guys. So everything I make, and I just make it myself. So it just makes it easier to control what is going into my food. Yeah, so those are my favorite. Lentils, yes, I love lentils. Black beans, I'm Cuban, so we always have like a vat of black beans that are frozen somewhere in my fridge. Here's a dirty little secret. My bucket list item, guys, is to have a cooking show one day on the Food Network. Shh, I know, it's kind of cheesy. But anyways, so yes. I think if you can take the time to learn simple recipes that you can make on your own, it also helps with maintaining that weight. Patrick says, you cook, I'll eat. All right. Yes, bison. It's a really great quality protein. And it actually doesn't taste bad. At first, I thought it was going to taste very gamey, but I actually like the taste of bison. I use it in pretty much everything that I do with beef. 7-layer cake. Yes. Yes. Cheese is my downfall as well, Megan, but they can actually be a great source of protein in moderation. So, all right, guys, this is good talk. This was a fun talk. Okay. Anyways, moving on. Let's do something different. All right. Ooh, here's a good one. Thinking about, David says, hey, Cosi, just thinking about the new innovations from College Park and wondering if they have a design for a swimming foot. Reggie, I hope you're still on board. I'm due for a new one soon. Any news on that? Okay, so I did a little bit of looking up of things, guys, but I definitely want to look a little bit more into things. And in Florida, a lot of my folks will come in and ask me, how can I get back to the pool? How can I get back to the beach? How can I go swimming? I have one hotshot here, Mark, who got his scuba diving license. So he was able to share a video with me that I'll share with you guys in just a moment. When it comes to swim feet, it just depends on what you want to do with the foot. If it's a foot that you just want to go walking around with, like walking on the beach, walking on the pool, I recommend 2 feet that I particularly like, the Breeze Foot by College Park and the Stubby's Foot. So the Breeze Foot, it's a very, very simple foot, and it's a very inexpensive foot. It actually looks a lot like a Satch foot. And the cool thing is it has a port on the bottom so the water can drain out. And it's basically a foot that can take the abuse of chlorinated water and salt water, right? Great little foot for walking around. I love the Stubby Foot because it has that multi-axial. So a Stubby Foot is that little square foot, and it has a nice tread on the bottom of it. It's called the Sidekicks. The Sidekicks foot from College Park, right? And it has a nice little tread, a little bit of movement in the foot itself, and it's great for shower, pool, beach. That's another great little foot that could. When it comes for actual swimming, that's where you got to get a little bit more creative, right? So for pool swimming, I usually tell my amputees, just get into the water without your socket. It's just easier to swim without a foot on. And if you look at all of our Paralympic swimmers, and they don't swim with a prosthetic leg. They just swim with their residual limbs, and they use more of their upper body, right? Now, when it comes to things like scuba diving, let me see if I can share my screen, guys. Thank you, Reggie. Reggie says the Voyager, the Terrain, and the Orbit are 3 of our newest feet, no specific swim feet. But I'm correct, right, Reggie? Did I get it right when I said the Breeze Foot and, well, the Sidekicks I know for sure, right? All right, guys, let me see if I can share my screen because there's a great video of my buddy Mark. So what Mark did is he just got, I agree with you, Reggie. For me, Reggie says the prostheses are like boat anchors in the water, very dangerous. So yeah, if you're in the pool, I say go without your socket. If you're trying to do something like scuba diving or snorkeling, here's my little 2-cent approach. try it first just using your sound limb. Because like Reggie said, that prosthesis can weigh a ton in the water, and you got to get creative on how you keep it on, because the water is going to make it slip off, right? So for many of you, it might just be easier, especially if you are below the knee, it might be easier to just use your sound limb if you're snorkeling or scuba diving. My buddy Mark here, so what he did is he got an old foot, just an old foot and an old socket, and he attached the swim fin and then bent the fin itself. So it looks a little, let me see if I can share this video. All right, so hopefully you're gonna get to see Mark show up, and here he is right there. So can you see that yellow fin, how it's bent a little bit? Okay. Were y'all able to see that? Ooh, Reggie's with all the good ideas tonight. Reggie says a pool noodle or a pipe insulation is great buoyancy aid for your prosthesis. I like that. So I don't know if you guys were able to see that video of Mark with his fin. So he just had it bent. No? Ugh. Yes, you saw it? Okay. So guys, you can do it that way. There are some feet, and this is something I just did not have time to look up, guys, and I do apologize. I think, and don't quote me on this, because if I get it wrong, I'll be very embarrassed. I think Freedom Innovations might have a foot that points down. I know Amy Purdy used it during her Dancing with the Stars. She actually was dancing on swim feet that are pointing down. So that is an option. The other option, and I have never worked with this particular equipment, I just found this and it looked very interesting, is the amp fins. So I was looking through this and I see how they attached the fin directly to the socket. Did you guys catch that? So guys, there's, if scuba diving or snorkeling is something that you really have a passion for and that's something you really want to do, again, I would just say try it out first just with your sound limb, okay? And just see how you do in the water. It could be that you're just perfectly comfortable, because again, when you're scuba diving and snorkeling, you're not sitting there paddling super fast unless you got a shark behind you, right? You're just kind of lazily going through the water. So you could potentially swim with one leg and be able to propel yourself. However, like Mark said, his prosthesis is his leg and he wants to use it for every experience. This is the time to have that talk with the prosthetist and just see what they can come up with. And again, can you get that foot that points down into plantar flexion and then have the fin attached? You also have to take into consideration the suspension. So you might need an extra suspension sleeve because you are in the water. Let's see. Reggie says there's a wing that was made that clamps to your pylon instead of the foot. It creates really good water thrust. And I forgot the name. I know. And I need to look this up a little bit more, but I just kind of wanted to put some of this information out there. Like I said, I've never worked with amp fin, but I've just looking at their website and the way the socket with the fin is directly attached to the socket. I'm like, that looks like a pretty good design. So I think it's worth just kind of checking it out and just seeing what your processors would have to say about something like that. Let's see. Tom says, I have the Cape 4 prosthetic foot from Autobach on a waterproof socket and love it. There you go. So anybody else out there who does swimming, do you do it with your prosthesis or without your prosthesis? Go ahead and put it in the comment section. All right, next question. Oh, he's hot. All right, so Jim says, I found that when swimming without my prosthesis that I float like a rock, like a cork, like a cork. So again, if you are scuba diving and you need to be weighted down, maybe that prosthesis helps. Kim goes without. Harsh says he swims without. Keitha says without. And then again, there's the in-between. So there's some of my patients that they use their prosthesis to get to the edge of the beach. And when they reach the water's edge, they sit down, take their prosthesis off and scoot into the ocean and just start swimming that way. Or they use crutches to get down to the water's edge. So there's many different ways to skin that cat. So it's just a matter of kind of practicing and seeing what works best for you. Because I think for me, you know, that's what I love living in Florida, is just being near the water. So whenever I have someone who says they miss being in the water, I'm just like, all right, game on. Let's figure out how we can problem solve this and get you back on the beach, right? All right. All right. There is, ooh, here's a good one. And this might seem like an obvious question, but I figure there might be a lot of beginners here listening, and I want them to, you know, Pat says definitely without. Okay. All right. So, Pat, oh my gosh, Pat, I just remembered. Can you please email me, Pat? There is something I wanted to run by you. And I hate to sound so mysterious, but my mom brain is on fire and I don't want to forget. Can you please send me an email and say, hey, Cosi, what is it that you wanted to run by me? So I remember to tell you. Okay. Someone asked this question on one of the support groups, and I was like, you know what? We got to answer this. The person asked, does anyone go to physical therapy that is specialized for amputees? If so, do you find it better? My first amputation, I just went to a physical therapy place that dealt with everything, and they told me I was like their second amputee. This time around, I have someone that specializes in therapy for people who have lost limbs. So guys, for those of you who are out there listening right now, that maybe this is your first time listening to this show, maybe you are on having to make that decision of whether you have an amputation or not. Yes. Physical therapists do specialize in working with amputees. There are not many of us out there, but we do exist. And it's certainly worth the effort to go and find that physical therapist who specializes in working with amputees. And that brings me to my next point. Do you need physical therapy after amputation? Yes, you do. Yes, you do. One more time for the people in the back. Yes, you do. So if you are facing amputation, if this is something that you've already had the amputation surgery, even if you're years out of your amputation surgery, physical therapist is someone who needs to be in your phone directory, in your cell phone, okay? The majority of my patients actually who come to see me at my clinic here in Tampa are years out of their amputation. Years out, which is very different from when I was working in the hospital and the clinics where I would see my patients fresh out of their amputation surgeries. And the reason being is many of my patients never received physical therapy. They figured out how to kind of get around on their legs, but years into it, they were either still struggling with a cane or a walker, or if they were one of the lucky ones who figured out how to walk without a cane or a walker, they were starting to experience problems like joint pain and back problems because they had gait mechanics that were not working for them, okay? So, yes, physical therapists. All right, here's one. Okay, so here brings it to this next question right here. Thank you, Chris. Yes, PT is a must. All right, so here's another one, guys. She asks, I'm having to make the decision between a fusion and a below-the-knee amputee. I'm scared of both options, but I want to choose the one that will allow me to be the most active with the least amount of complications or more surgeries. Can you offer any guidance? So guys, with a question like this, obviously, I don't know much about this person's medical history or even what's going on that has led to this point in the road. So I can just offer my generalized information on the benefits and the pros and cons of each side of it. When you've gotten to the point where a surgeon is recommending, and I'm assuming she's saying, I'm assuming it's her ankle, an ankle fusion, okay, or amputation. So things to think about. With something like an ankle fusion, okay, you are limiting your range of motion, right? So where's Bob? Bob's hiding out. He thinks he can get away from me. You're stuck with me, buddy. All right. So with something like an ankle fusion, right, the bones here on the inside in the middle of that ankle joint are fused, right? So the ankle won't move. It's basically stuck in this position, right? So the point is that the person will have increased stability when they're walking, and that they'll have a joint that they can walk on. Okay. The person will be limited in their activity level. Okay. So something like if the person is a very active person with sports and running, that may not be a possibility after an ankle fusion surgery. Okay. Okay. So when a person has the ankle fusion, usually what I tell people is they need to talk to their doctor and they need to have their surgeon really lay it out for them and be very specific about what they are going to be able to do after fusion surgery and what they are not going to be able to do after fusion surgery. The other thing to consider is, are you someone who has underlying issues like diabetes, vascular issues, issues that are going to make the healing process a bigger challenge, right? Because that's usually a lot of times where I see these ankle fusions fail is when the person is a smoker, the person has diabetes that is not under control, the person has vascular issues that are not under control, right? And the ankle fusion is kind of that last ditch effort before they move on to amputation, right? So again, these are questions to ask your doctor and your surgeon. Okay. The obvious cons to a below the knee amputation is you're removing your limb, and that's it. There's no going back after that. Okay. And that is a very final, decision there. I will say from years of experience, I've heard just as many stories of amputees who went through multiple surgeries, including fusions that ended up failing and ended up in a below the knee amputation. And easily half those people said, I'm glad I went through all those surgeries to know that I tried everything I could before I got to an amputation. And I have the other half that say, I wish I would have known I was going to end up with an amputation so that I could have skipped all those other surgeries. So I think your psychology of who you are also has a lot to do with this kind of a decision. Okay. Are you someone who will be at peace with making that decision and moving on with your life? Or do you want to be able to say that you tried everything you could before making the decision to amputate? And again, these are questions you must talk with your surgeon. Okay. And even with a psychologist, there was a gentleman that was on my show, and he went through a lot of medical problems with his leg. And he was the one who brought it to his surgeon that he wanted to amputate. And his surgeon had him evaluated by a psychiatrist to make sure that he was making this for the right reasons. Okay. So again, these are just things to think about. Let's see. Carrie says, I've been working for 18 years. I wish there was some way. Carrie, please send me an email after the show. This is something that I can kind of try to point you in the right direction for this. So send me an email after the show, Carrie. Pat says, in addition to regular PT as an above the knee amputee, I work with a personal trainer who was a below the knee amputee, and both were absolutely worth it. So guys, when it comes to, and I'd love to hear from you guys, because I know many of you had to go through this decision yourself. Many of you either went through multiple surgeries because of a trauma before you finally amputated. Some of you did not get that choice and you had the amputation done right away. Would you have wanted to go through some of these limb salvage surgeries to try it out? I think it's as long as there is full disclosure, that to me is the part that the bottom line for me. That's the bottom line for me. And I'll tell you one story. I know I'm telling a lot of stories tonight. Back in my early days when I was working pediatrics, there was one young girl. She was probably 16 years old, and she was on her way to becoming a soccer phenom. Colleges were already looking at her. She was an athlete to the max. And the discipline that this young girl had at 16, she would get up at 5 a.m, do her workouts. I mean, she was incredible. And she was diagnosed with an osteosarcoma, right? And I remember at the time I was still a very young therapist. So I was basically watching this case, and I was working with this young girl, and she and her parents decided to do limb salvage surgery. And basically the surgeon had let her know that she would get to keep her leg, right? But she would not be able to play sports anymore. And because her leg was going to be so fragile, right? Because they had to remove so much bone to get rid of the cancer. Just even walking up a flight of stairs could potentially cause a fracture, right? So I really, really struggled with that at the time. I knew the surgeon, and the surgeon was a good person. Surgeon was a good person and wanted to help save this young girl's leg. And the parents and the girl, they wanted to save her leg, And at the time, I didn't know enough about amputees. I didn't know enough about prosthetics. And, but there was a part of me that just said, would she have led a better quality of life as an amputee? Because as an amputee, she could have gotten back into sports. This is a kid that, looking back, I'm like, she could have been a Paralympian, and it's just one of those that you're just sitting there going, right. And so for me, ever since that case, for me, it's more important about the person, whatever decision the person makes, that they have full information, that they truly understand what all of their options are and what all of the consequences will be of each decision to make. Yeah, I know. That's a case that kind of, 19 years later, it still sticks with me, right? All right, next question. We got time for one more question. I got to talk about this at least once a week. Right. So this person says, has anyone gotten to the point that their residual limb does not sweat? I've been left above the knee for a year and 3 months, and my prosthetist tells me my residual limb will just stop sweating without using sweat block stuff. Yeah, no offense to that prosthetist, but that's not how it works. So here's the quick ditty on sweat, guys. It's not your imagination, okay? If after your amputation, and guys, let's do another Cosi poll. How many of you after your amputation noticed that your limb was sweating more? That you just noticed that you sweat more, whether it was just your limb or your whole body, okay? It's not your imagination. Reason being is when you remove the limb, you're basically removing all of that surface area for sweat, right? So now your body has that much less skin to sweat from. And the thing is, everybody's like, yeah. I see it in the comment section. Kenny's like, indeed. Okay. So what happens is your body still has to lower its temperature, right? Your body has to keep itself cool. So it's just going to have to over sweat from the pores that are left in your body. Okay. So and especially, ladies who are going through that change later on in their life, it's a sweat fest, guys. It's going to happen. Okay. And the thing is, for some people it stabilizes, that they'll have an increased moment of sweat, during the period of time that their body is adjusting to the limb loss and amputation. And then afterwards, it kind of just levels out. Some people, it never does. It never does. I know I'd probably be one of those people because I sweat like a thief in church, right? So, and then some people, it's localized to the limb, right? Some people, they just have increased sweat on their limb. Other people, they have increased sweat in their whole body. Right. Y'all know where I'm going with this, right? So, sweat is a fact of life here in Florida, 365 days of the year. So having people learn how to manage sweat, there's no such thing as getting rid of sweat or making your body stop sweating. We don't want that. We'd overheat and we'd cook our brains, and that's no bueno, right? So it's about managing your sweat. Okay. We have specialty liners out there nowadays that are starting to come out that help actually bring a cooler temperature to the limb. We have some wonderful skin products. My favorites are the Vital Fit products because these are designed to help manage the sweat in your limb, especially with the liquid to powder lotion, which I love. Okay. There are other options. And I've been meaning to get the dermatologist back on the show. I really would love to have him back on the show to talk a little bit more about this. Things like Botox injections that I know some of you have had to help stop the sweat for extreme situations. Okay. So just wanted to give a quick ditty on this because the person who sent this question, I think they were just like, am I crazy? Am I really sweating more? Is this really, you're not imagining things. You are sweating more. And, some people it will even out. Some people it will not. Okay. But there are ways to deal with it. Joe says, I don't sweat at all through my skin grafts and burns. They cover my entire lower half and it causes bad swelling because the fluid has nowhere to go. And you're right, Joe, that is a big problem. I used to work in the burn unit for many years. And the reason why is when you have a burn or skin damage that is so deep that it requires grafting, it means that the damage has gone deep enough that it has destroyed not only the sweat glands, but the sebaceous glands, the oil glands. Okay, so those of you who have grafting on your residual limb, okay, may notice that you don't sweat from the graft, and your graft is also drier and itchier, right? Especially in the beginning when that graft is fresh and healing. It's, itchy because you don't have those oil secretions, that nice natural lubricant on your skin from the natural oil glands, right? Yeah. So it's something that you have to deal with. And obviously the wider spread your skin grafting, right, you're going to have more issues like Joe mentioned, where the fluid has to go somewhere, right? I know, burn itching. Man, when I worked that burn unit, it broke my heart to see my patients that they would have these new grafts that were healing. And I would see my patients going to scratch it. And I was like a mom. I was like, no, don't scratch it because you're going to tear it. And just having to, put some lotion on it and try to help them as best they can with the itching. Compression garment is another option, Joe. That's another option to kind of help push the fluid out of the area to area where it can sweat. Let's see. Jim says, before signing off, I want to input shin fins, trademark fins fit on your legs. They do not attach to your feet, so your feet are completely free. That's why they are very different to the feet. Okay. Yeah, so it was even worse on the thigh from the graft site, right? Harsh. Even the area where you have the graft, where the skin graft is taken, that becomes its own wound right there, right? And its own issue right there. All right, guys. We are good for this evening. Y'all have been keeping me talking and I love it. Thank you guys so much for all the questions that you guys sent in. If I didn't get your questions, you do wear the compression, Joe. Good. If I didn't get to your question, please feel free to send it to me. You can send it to me at my website. I'm going to type that in there for you guys. Okay. And guys, please check out my Strong Body program. It's got 150 exercises for above the knee and below the knee amputees, videos, and books. So check it out. That's the website. All right, guys. I will see you next week. Same bad time, same bad channel. Send in your questions, and I will get them for you.